can share, my approach was like, well, I saw that the studio, so this was a COVID bonus, was because everyone got locked down, and we were kind of at that time, regional New South Wales was open but Sydney was closed, so I think there was a whole pile of cancellation. So Instagram, I saw that there was a promotion that I could do because I was local that involved both. But the first process for me, I suppose, and I would recommend this for any of you, I mean anyone really, when you're making art and you're putting it in the world, is you want to think to what end, like what are you doing this for? And there isn't really a right and a wrong. Like if it's a matter of you're making this for you, for your like posterity, or just because you like are feeling driven to do it, or if you want to meet a market. And I know for me, I really came into this saying, okay, like from my, I've been making music and recording music for a long time. I don't want to say how long, but a long time. And it's really changed. Like it used to be, I would make an EP with a view to selling it at a gig, and I'd make an EP with a view to getting more gigs. That was really all how it worked, and what, like what it was about. CDs, people bought them, people listened to them. People really, I kind of feel like the day of the CD is dead. So it's sort of like now it's shifting, rather than this, that your recording becomes like a product that you're going to sell. For me, I was like, well, now the recording is being consumed a lot more via places like Spotify. So I was very specific about I wanted someone who could work with me to create a sound that was me, which still represented the way I approached things, but that could sit in this market, this sort of Spotify market. And then when I spoke to you, I was like, this is what I want to do, and this is me, and this is my career, and this is my capacity. And then you suggested Paul, and that was a great outcome. So I would recommend, even from my perspective, I recommend that before you even start this sort of a project, like know what it's about for you, like why you're doing it, to what end. And then when you approach a studio, have a good discussion about how they can or can't meet your needs, as an aside.
Yeah, absolutely. And really considering, if you have, say, 10 or 20 songs in your bag, really considering trying to sort of condense that down to find the absolute cream in that, so that then you can spend more time recording those, say, 5 songs, and then slowly releasing them and using them to promote, as opposed to doing 10 songs, maybe a bit rushed, and releasing it all at one time out into the world. You really need to consider your marketing strategy.
Are you finding more artists are taking that approach, like rather than I'm going to record a whole album and release a whole album? Are you finding people coming in more these days and recording singles or EPs? Yeah.
I mean, that shift kind of happened 5 to 7 years ago. So it's more and more common. I guess the other thing to consider is that if you are in a band situation with acoustic instruments, it takes time to set up a drum kit and to mic up a drum kit, for instance. So if you were considering only doing a handful of songs, it's going to be better to do that all in one go, as opposed to one song here and one song there, because it takes about half a day
it does
to mic up and get sounds and whatnot. So you're already 4
and you kind of
hours
want to
down.
back to back it as well, like rather than dribs and drabs. Like you do want to kind of, if you can, block your booking together so that you are avoiding that,
and from a creative standpoint as well, you know, really maintaining that focus and that sort of drive.
I think it makes it more fun too. I loved that we got like the deal that I went in and there was that option of like I could have done it minus the accommodation. I was like, no, hell no, I want to be here and stay and immerse and have that kind of like real luxury of, for me, and everyone's got their stuff, like their day jobs or their whatever, like, so I've got my business hat and my mum hat and this freaking hat and the other hat, and so it was nice to just go, no, I'm staying here, and that's like really getting in the pocket and really channeling all the energy. Like there is something about. And I think in visual arts there tends to be a lot more of this idea of residencies, and they're funded and you can apply for them, and it's much more a part of your professional development is to go into these residencies. But the idea is that you immerse, and there is something about immersion that really brings kind of like a real level of focus. So I don't know if people can somehow immerse, you know, when they're making an album, I'd recommend it if you can extend to it.
It's kind of, in a way, it's kind of like method acting, you know, you're staying in that character space.
Exactly.
And things kind of come to you, you know, if you talk about like channeling the muse and things like that, you know, it's just being open to that is a really valuable thing that you kind of can't get so much if you're going back.
If you go home and you break that, if you break the energy. So yeah, I think it's a good thing. So another little, like, just by the by tip, I think too, for those of you that are in that emerging space, so if you don't have a massive budget, I do think, like, get yourself really prepared first. Like, rehearse the hell out of your songs first and get them as good as you can on your own, and do that process of narrowing down, like, however you might do that, whether you get people, and this is not just your friends, these are people who would be fans of your music, like, narrow it down a little bit to work out and maybe get professional opinion of like what songs. Some songs don't translate, some songs are great live and they don't translate amazingly in the studio. So that's just as a little aside for those of you who are emerging.
Well, that's super relevant, you know. I can't stress enough that to really know your music and be so sure of the arrangement before you come into the space. And, you know, in terms of rehearsing, if you're with a band, bare minimum is 3 hours, 3 times a week. 4 hours. Ideally, 5 times a week for the month leading up to your session. You know what I mean? And then when you're not performing or rehearsing with a band, you're rehearsing every day.
And you do need to be, and I mean, I know for some, like, obviously for someone like me, I'm a mum, like that level of rehearsal in that structure was not available. So I was working, so we did a lot of independent practice and do practice, because you were going to get RSI. Like, there were certain songs, like, I don't know, my thumb's still recovering from one of the songs, because you're going to play them over and over again. So make sure you're like physically match fit, because it's like,
it's hardcore.
It is. It's actually like very hard work on your body and your concentration and your fingers and
like it's a great experience and it's a fun environment, but it's work.
It is work.
So, you know, if your life is more complicated, and many people do have lots going on, doing things like singing your songs as you drive to work.
I did a lot of singing in the car. Just
every day, even if it's 20 minutes, half an hour, any opportunity you can to get match fit is a good thing. If you have an opportunity, if you play an instrument, you know, just really picking it up every day to get those calluses on your fingertips, or whatever you're doing, you know, really just making a concerted effort to allocate as much free time as possible. And it's only for a month.
And it's it's well worth it. On that level of managing expectations too, it's like usually a studio hires out for a day. Well, it's a kind of like a nebulous like length of day, and you don't want to cut, you know, there has to be a reasonable expectation of they are a long day, but they're not a forever day. So there is an onus on the band to understand, like, if your budget is X number of days, you need to be able to get it done in that time and not lean on that the studio is going to give you extra time for free, or the producer, if you're using one of the engineers, going to, you know, like, you can't bleed everyone dry. So part of your responsibility also in the exchange is being as prepared as you can.
Look, let's face it, unless you're a professional touring musician and you're gigging, you know, 9 months out of the year, you're not going to be able to maintain your energy and focus for 8 to 12 hours a day.
It's really a long day.
So realistically, you're going to get, you know, a handful of hours where you're super focused. And then you've got to take a break. And whether that's, you know, walking around the grounds here,
which is amazing.
having some food. And actually, you know, if you want to get really nerdy, actually being really particular about the type of food that you're eating. You know,
We were
eating
pretty
stodge.
we were very nerdy in this when we came in. There
Great.
was a lot of fresh fruit and veg
Totally.
and big pots of soup, a lot of fluids.
Yep.
You got to keep your fluids up, especially if you're singing. Actually, especially if you're singing, you really got to look after your voice, because you're going to sing a lot longer than you would at a gig or even a rehearsal. I mean, you're going to sing for hours and hours.
Yep, and in a much more focused way.
Yeah.
So, you know, actually leading up to a recording, loading up on A, fluids, and B, vitamin C rich foods will just help sustain your energy and ensure, in particular with your singing, that your vocal cords are hydrated enough, you know.
And you want to cap out too, because even from a mechanical version, you know, point from your vocal cords too, is that you want to be using them in control, because like that's kind of like how they meet. And if you start getting them all swollen because you're not using them, or you're getting tired, so if you're tired, you don't want to turn up. See, I think you don't. There's this lovely rock and roll idea, like you don't want to turn up stoned and drunk and hungover. It's a great rock and roll idea if you've got a whole year of a studio paying for you to be in there and you've only got to pull off a few hours over that time. But if you're in for focus time, like seriously, it's better to nerd out unless you've got zillions of do not waste your money, and look after your instrument, like from a vocal point of view too. If you're tired, you're worn out, you're not hydrated, you'll find your vocal folds will swell up and you'll end up raspy and breathy, and not in a good way, in an unsustainable way, and you won't be accurate, and you'll, you know, again end up with this whole kind of tracks you have to mess in there afterwards.
I had a session about just over a year ago. It was a metal band, and the drummer, who was younger than everyone else, went out and got very drunk the night before, and actually got done for a DUI. So he lost his license. He essentially didn't sleep the whole night, and then he showed up to a session. Yeah,
and you're gonna let your band down. Don't let your band down.
You know, you don't need to be necessarily a professional to bring a professional attitude.
And I think also for those of you that are out there that are wanting to move into that direction of being professional artists, then I think it is a changed industry. I think those wild rock and roll loose days are changing, because a lot more people are independently producing, and if you're independently producing, then you can't afford to be a
not at all
rock star.
Not at all
in that sense. New kind of rock star.
There's a great book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, as opposed to The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Very different book, but you know, he really talks about putting on your professional cap at any opportunity. Doesn't mean that you're necessarily going out there and making big bucks doing your creative your craft, but you're focused and you're honoring the energy that you're putting into it. So it's a really good read for anyone who's who maybe needs a little bit of focus. Really sort of nice bite-sized little paragraphs.
And I feel that, so not to be like lecturing, like, I mean, you do you. It's your money, it's your studio time. Just in terms of like sharing a few, and that's what I wanted. So we've kind of gone there anyway, which is just sharing a few of those tips for people of, like, you know, how to get the most out of their studio session, which I think we kind of have covered. Is there anything else you can think of for anyone, like just in terms of, you know,
like really rudimentary preparation things? So we've gone through the rehearsing. Good start. Things like putting new strings on your instruments. Getting new skins on your drums, getting replacement skins and strings and picks and drumsticks and any of the little perishable items.
And having them here so that you don't break them. You know, you're not in that sense of like, oh, I've got to shoot out and try and find a shop open when it's not, and then it throws the wheels off.
And you know, if you want to try different instruments, you don't always need to hire them. You can, you know, do the classic beg, borrow, and steal from friends or acquaintances, and say, hey, look, can I borrow that amp for a day? I'll give it back. It'd be perfect condition. And then you've got options here.
Yeah.
You know? So you don't have to put money on the table
Yeah.
every single time.
Yeah, that's great for those. Yeah.